Critical response to Wonderful Life and with Stephen Fry's is an idea that we perhaps sometimes need to criticize the critique, shall we say, in society. And, we know that Stephen is a bit of a critique of the way people come to their conclusions, the things that they understand and the things they assume. And we're looking at Stephen Fry's Wonderful Life. It's an audio book. It's a captivating celebration of the diversity and interconnectedness of life. Its storytelling succeeds in inspiring wonder, and few would, despite the dispute the remarkable complexity of the natural world. So it's a very interesting audio book. The question, however, is not whether life is interconnected, which we know he adequately explains it is, with his marvellous wit and charm, but whether the question is whether this same interconnectedness necessarily demonstrates that all living organisms around arose through an undirected evolutionary process. That's, I think, the main thrust of what he's saying, that all of these interconnected living organisms, that they all arose through an undirected evolutionary process, and sometimes we perhaps need to challenge that very, very conclusion. Throughout his series, the interconnectedness of life is presented as evidence in itself of common ancestry. Yet one could argue that the same evidence presents a significant explanatory challenge, shall we say, for evolutionary theory itself. So his audiobook repeatedly highlights the dependence of one organism upon another. Bacteria, for instance, sustain human health. Fungi support forests through underground mycorrhizal networks. Insects pollinate flowering plants. Corals in the sea survive through their partnership with microscopic algae. And entire ecosystems function through countless cooperative relationships. The difficulty, shall we say, is in when you listen to his audiobook, is that such relationships often appear to require both partners to possess the complementary characteristics before either receives the full benefit. Let me think what I'm saying is natural selection can only preserve adaptations that already, shall we say, confer an advantage. If one half of a mutually dependent relationship appears long before the other, then the selective advantage may be absent or greatly diminished. Consider flowering plants and their specialized pollinators. Many flowers depend upon a narrow range of insects or birds for reproduction, and without these they can't reproduce. While those pollinators also rely upon the flowers for nourishment. Evolutionary biology attempts to explain these systems through gradual co-evolution over immense periods. Critics, though, because there are critics of evolution, however, they question whether the numerous intermediate stages would consistently provide sufficient advantage for both species to survive and continue evolving together. So that's the criticism of the process. The same challenge appears beneath our feet. The audiobook of Stephen celebrates fungi as indispensable partners of forests. Yet modern research increasingly reveals that many trees exchange nutrients and chemical signals through extensive fungal networks. Such systems function as integrated wholes. The more these relationships are studied, the more some observers argue that they do appear coordinated rather than, shall we say, independently assembled. And that's a problem for the evolutionary theory, shall we say, on the process. Human dependence, shall we say, upon microorganisms presents a similar question. The trillions of microbes inhabiting the digestive system they're not merely passengers. They contribute to digestion. They contribute to immunity and many other bodily processes. While evolutionary theory proposes that these partnerships developed gradually, critics would ask how both host and microbes, how they maintained increasingly specialized cooperation throughout their evolutionary history. So before these interdependent processes came about fully, how did they manage their specialized cooperation before this final result, shall we say? So Stephen's audiobook rightly emphasizes that ecosystems are astonishingly interconnected. Ironically, this very interconnectedness, though, may be viewed as presenting an explanatory problem, shall we say, rather than a confirmation. So just because things look similar, that doesn't prove, shall we say, that the similarities are connected. You can't use the end result to prove how the end result came about. So let me see an example. As biological research progresses, relationships once thought to be incidental increasingly prove essential, shall we say. And without them, each microorganism or species would not have been able to even function. The origin of such integrated systems, therefore, becomes more difficult to explain solely by a sequence of independent mutations filtered by natural selection. This is a difficult thing to explain. Another issue concerns timing. Evolution is generally described as a gradual process driven by cumulative small changes over vast timescales. Yet many biological systems depend upon multiple coordinated features existing simultaneously. Critics would argue that where several complementary adaptations are required before a significant benefit arises, then incremental evolution may face additional explanatory hurdles. How did this happen over a long period of time, and what was going on before the necessary interdependent process had finally evolved, shall we say. The critics, this critique that I'm saying now, it does not deny adaptation. Obviously, it doesn't deny it. Observable changes within species, natural selection and genetic variation are well documented. Rather, the question concerns whether these mechanisms alone can adequately explain the origin of deeply integrated biological systems and entirely new forms of life. So Stephen's audiobook also presents humanity as one branch among millions in the tree of life. From a critical perspective, however, human capacities, including abstract reasoning, symbolic language, mathematics, morality, music, scientific inquiry, and complex culture, may be seen as differences not merely of degree, but potentially of kind. So whether these uniquely human characteristics arose entirely through gradual evolutionary processes, remains an active subject of scientific and philosophical discussion. We cannot just dismiss these in some sort of massive hue of desire and interest in the wonderful aspect of the interconnectedness, and then get carried away and just completely dismiss, as much as we might like to, the questions that arise, the evolutionary questions that arise. Ultimately, The Wonderful Life of the Audio succeeds in cultivating admiration for nature, and that it arguably moves too quickly, though, from observation to conclusion. The evidence for interconnectedness of life is compelling. Whether that interconnectedness is best explained by universal common descent through undirected evolutionary mechanisms is a separate question. One interpretation is that interconnectedness reflects billions of years of cumulative evolutionary history. Another explanation, or shall we interpretation, is that highly integrated biological systems point towards, shall we say, purposeful organisation, or require additional explanatory mechanisms beyond those emphasised in Stephen's audiobook. The observations themselves do not logically compel only, shall we say, one conclusion. The true achievement of the audiobook Wonderful Life may therefore be unintended. By vividly illustrating the extraordinary interdependence of living organisms, it also highlights some of the deepest questions about the origin of life's complexity, whether one finds the evolutionary explanation sufficient, or believes, shall we say, the evidence invites alternative interpretations, remains a matter for continued scientific investigation and philosophical reflection. So what's my summary? Well, the above what I've just said clearly presents a critique while reflecting the mainstream scientific position that evolution explains interconnectedness through common descent and coevolution, making it clear where this critique reflects, shall we say, reflects an alternative interpretation rather than an established scientific conclusion.